Hello and welcome to CAD Live with me, Troy Francis, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, and I'll just put the display names on because I didn't have them for some reason. Mr. Nick August, star of Twitter and of YouTube, and of the wonderful PunchRiot literary magazine. So how are you, sir?
Doing very well. How are you?
I'm all right, mate. I'm all right. It's good to see you, mate. It's been sort of a long time coming, really, because I've wanted to have you on for a while, and for whatever reason we haven't got round to it. So it's good to see you today, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been looking forward to the chat for a while now.
Absolutely. So I guess we better start at the beginning then, really. I mean, so perhaps you could tell the guys a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do, and I don't know, your space in this whole sort of weird space that we're all somewhat part of.
Yeah, sure. For the last 20 years, I've basically been a software engineer and a software tech exec, and left the company that I helped start back in 2010. I left there last February, right as Corona was hitting. And for the last year, I've basically been doing as little as possible, kind of taking a semi-retirement sabbatical kind of thing. And it was during this time that I started reading a lot of fiction, mainly on the web. Particularly, one of the first writers that I ran across was our mutual acquaintance Ernst Groff. And
yes.
And in fact, I think I first noticed him because you and I were already friends on Twitter, and I started seeing his tweets pop up, and so I found a lot of writers on Twitter that I really enjoyed, and I was getting tired of having to go to 10 different websites in order to read the stuff I like. So I figured if I started a magazine, I could make them send their stuff to me, and then I'd have it all in one place. So. That's kind of what I've been doing for the last year, about a year now, is publishing PunchRiot and mainly working with writers in regards to that.
Nice. And PunchRiot, in case people don't know, it's an online magazine, I suppose, at the moment. Would that be fair to say, that comes out about monthly right now?
Yeah, originally it came out twice a month, and that got to be just a little bit too much work, so I condensed it into a monthly. And it's an online magazine. It is by subscription only, although we do have a sample mag on the website at punchriot.com that people can download for free and get a sense of what our content is like. And but yeah, it comes out in PDF, and it's formatted so that it's very printer friendly. On a standard black and white printer, and so people can read it electronically, or if they prefer, they can print it out and read it as a paper copy.
Yeah, for sure. Is there any plans in the future to do any sort of print runs or limited edition print runs, do you think, or go to do an anthology or anything like that?
There is actually. It's not really cost effective right now to publish and send out a print version every month, but what I'm doing is, for the subscribers who were subscribers last year, I'm in the process of getting all of those issues re-edited and then bound as kind of an anthology, and then I'm going to actually mail those out to all the subscribers.
Nice.
So you do end up getting a print copy of the whole year. It's just you get it later.
Nice. Yeah, that'd be really good. I mean, obviously print is costly, and I mean, everyone knows what happened to the industry, but I think, I mean, because actually, funny enough, Ryan Stone, and he's also been published in PunchRiot, I think, hasn't he? And he's a great writer. He has spoken several times about this idea of potentially doing sort of a print-only book, or even a print-only sort of mini journal or something like that. So I think there is still this appetite for print, isn't there? But it's just that obviously it's, as you say, it's costly and not very convenient.
Well, what I've noticed is I did a little research in this to try to figure out the best way to set up operations for PunchRiot. And As it turns out, the book industry is still doing pretty well. The print book industry, people, at least in the U.S., which is where I'm based and where I did most of my research, is that there are still a lot of people buying books, but magazines are still, print magazines are still dying because the internet is really better at doing what most magazines used to do. And it does it more efficiently and cheaply. So, leave it to me to decide to start a magazine at the time that they're all dying.
Well, it's always good. It's always good to go against the grain, isn't it? Though, and really, that's what PunchRiot does, because it's. I mean, you've got some pretty. How can I put it? Really, everybody in there's pushing against the grain a little bit, aren't they? They're sort of like there's some pretty unconventional voices in there.
Well, one of the reasons that I started this was because, again, I was running across people who were writing, fiction or creative stuff online, and one or two of them complained that they had tried to get their stories published in other websites or publications or journals, magazines, and they were criticized for being too violent, too sexist, too this, too that. And I said, let's make it, that's what I'm all about anyway. So let's just throw it out there and give these people who I think are really good writers a place to publish, and give people who want to read, some fresh, edgy, savage content a place to get it. And, it just kind of took off from there.
Yeah. Which is quite exciting, really, because you think about these scenes in the past where, you had groups of writers. I think like Paris in the 20s is a classic sort of example, isn't it? And, there would be little soirees and little journals and magazines and things would pop up, and people would publish each other. And it's kind of cool that we're seeing something. Well, what you're doing is similar to that in our space, isn't it? Which is effectively, because here's a question: what's your connection with like the manosphere or the dating space or Red Pill and all that? I mean, is that? How would you describe your relationship to that space as an individual and with the magazine?
I mean, I think we're definitely friends. I think there's a lot of sympathetic ideas or perspectives that are shared back and forth. And PunchRiot is not really, it's not necessarily a manosphere thing. It's not even necessarily a right-wing thing. It is kind of a libertarian publication in the broadest sense of the world. And it's really, I don't publish, lefty, commie, feminist garbage. I don't, I will say that I don't do that. But aside from that, it's really for anybody, reader or writer, whose politics does not supersede their aesthetic or their entertainment, right? So, I don't have strict guidelines apart from what I just mentioned, but yeah, I think there's a lot of traditional masculinity in a lot of the stories and in a lot of the writers that we've published so far.
Yeah, for sure. Would you ever publish women, or is this sort of exclusively kind of aimed at guys and written by guys, or is that not something you've really considered yet?
Well, I have published one woman several times already, and it's the magazine itself is definitely aimed, more at men, but there are women. I do have women subscribers. Men greatly outnumber them, of course, but I do have women subscribers, and I've published at least one woman several times so far. And I don't, what I care about is the writing. I need good writing. I need all the good writing I could get. So I'm not going to turn away anything that's good and that kind of fits in our vibe. And it just so happens that the one woman I've published so far, she writes as savagely as any of the dudes do. And the story, but it's not because she's a woman. It's just because the stories are good, and I enjoy them, and I think, and most of our readers do too.
Yeah, for sure. So what's your connection with writing and so on? Because you talked about being a software guy and so on, but obviously you've got this very literary side to you. How did that come about? Have you done, is it something you've always had? Is it something because you've got some qualification, I think, in this area as well, right?
Well, I was a big reader when I was a kid, and I did end up, when I went to college, I majored in everything you're not supposed to. I got a philosophy degree, and then I got a master's in literature and linguistics.
Okay, yeah.
And I taught college writing and college English for a while, and also worked as a freelance editor. And then when I eventually got out of that and got into software, I published a few professional articles, in software, which is not the same kind of thing. But, I've spent 20 years in the technology side, and I do have a strong creative side. I was a working amateur, semi-professional musician when I was younger, and I've been involved in creative things. And when I, took my leave of the software and tech game last February, it just felt like time. I wanted to do something new and different. And I got back to writing myself, and that kind of got me into doing the magazine.
Yeah, that's fantastic. There are some really cool writers in this space, though, aren't there? I mean, the guy, I suppose, who comes to mind is most for me is Delicious Tacos, who is a fantastic writer, very, very talented writer, without a doubt. Have you had any conversations with him at all? Are you sort of in contact with him?
Not really. I see him on Twitter every now and then, and I've read some of his stuff, and I bought one of his books and read it, and I agree, he's really great. He has not submitted anything to me for PunchRiot, so I haven't published anything, although I'd love to. But he's on his, he's kind of he's a few years ahead of where I'm at right now, so his audience is bigger, so I'm not sure I could really help him at all. And it makes sense that he would rather just he would keep on doing his own thing, which is cool too.
Yeah, he's got his thing going, and that's cool. I mean, like for me, I was really, well, I suppose I've had two obsessions in my life. One of them is writing and reading, which is they kind of go together, and the other is getting laid, crudely, and both of those things have sort of gone along over time, and for a while, getting laid and partying and degeneracy and stuff like that, superseded everything really. But also, I think one of the key things as somebody sort of creating content in this space, one of the key things I really just wanted to do was just write about it. Really, just write about all the crazy stuff that was happening, all the dates, all of the sexual escapades, all this kind of stuff, and And that was the motivation. And so it's always good when you see other people sort of doing the same thing, because you could sort of say, well, is going to a club and trying to get laid, is that really worthy of literature? But then you read a book like Ryan Stone's, which I think you had some, you gave him some help, I think, with the edits and stuff. And you see that actually, look, there's some good writing out there, which is on this very topic.
Yeah, I agree. I think, well, I mean, first of all, just to, say a word about Ryan, I think he undersells himself, but I think he's really a fantastic writer, and he can tell a story like nobody else. And I think that I think his storytelling ability, I think lends itself to what he's writing about. And I think the things he's writing about, those experiences, in pickup and running game and everything, I think when you do that and when you live that for a while, you have so many experiences that some of them just turn into great stories, and you end up telling them over and over and over again, to your buddies and stuff. And I think those just sort of work together in synchronicity to make somebody a better storyteller. And I think there's very much a storytelling component to both running game and then to telling your lessons about what you've learned, swapping notes like Ryan said.
Yeah. Well, I guess they all kind of go hand in hand, don't they? Because I was just recording something, a product that I'm doing before we came on here. And, one of the key things I'm talking about is storytelling. Because if you can tell stories when you're out in the club, when you've got the girls around you, when you're doing some daytime approach, or even on a date, if you can tell stories are so powerful, aren't they, in terms of how we communicate? And if you could do it effectively, that's not just going to be good for publishing stuff in PunchRiot, but equally, it can help you attract women as well.
I mean, I realized after a while that was kind of what I fell back onto when I was trying to meet chicks and do that kind of thing, and I learned, I developed my own little routine. Hey, how you doing? And I'd say, fine. I haven't committed too many misdemeanors yet, but the day's still young. Yeah. And then, it's like, oh, really? Are you a criminal? And I said, well, if I rob a bank, can I hide in your basement? And, everybody likes to have fun. Everybody likes to play, and women really enjoy, that kind of sparring back and forth, about just nonsense. And if you can do that and just have a good time, to me, that's the only way I ever knew how to break the ice. When I was younger, so that's just what I did.
Yeah. And people used to have this idea with game about lines and routines and all this kind of thing. And by and large, I don't think that's a great thing. I prefer a much more natural approach. Although I do have a friend actually who's quite big on routines, and I'm hoping to get him on here and interview him quite soon. But in the main, I think that I much prefer like an authentic sort of natural approach, and your ability to construct or come up with cool, interesting things to say is really one of the key things. It's really going to put you ahead of the pack, because people think, you're in the bar and you're talking to this girl and you've got all the chads there and everything else. But what you'll often see in social situations is that the guy who's got the gift of the gab, the guy who's able to talk in an amusing manner, is the guy who's got the most social capital. And it's not necessarily correlated to looks or anything else. Yeah,
I mean, I think the thing that I see a lot of dudes who are trying to get better at that, and I'm by no means not saying that I'm an expert. I've done well. I've done okay for myself for what I've wanted to do. But I think everybody thinks there's a secret phrase or a secret combination of phrases or these steps you have to follow to unlock unlock Pandora's box. But really, it's just, if you can find a way to start a conversation that's fun and it's not, creepy, and it's somewhat open-ended, then, to me, that's the best way to go, because like you said, it's natural.
Yeah, definitely. But I've always liked these writers, people like, of course, Bukowski is the obvious one that springs to mind, but Henry Miller as well. These guys who basically made a career out of writing about getting laid in one form or another. And what's unfortunate is that now, I don't think either of those guys would get published by a mainstream publisher. Do you?
No, I agree. I think we've landed in such weird puritanical times where, there was a time where it was the right wing that was considered puritanical, and now it's totally shifted to the left wing being very puritanical, and it was the left wing that championed people like Henry Miller and just writing about sex and what everybody calls degeneracy and deviancy. But writer, that was you mentioned Paris in the 20s, and you just mentioned, if you just talk about writers from the old days, just being a writer was considered to be somewhat of a decadent, degenerate lifestyle, because that's not real work, right? You're not getting your hands dirty, with anything with ink. But there was a lot of, there was a lot of, fucking, if I can say, probably shouldn't say that on YouTube, but there was a lot going on. In that crowd was particularly had a reputation for promiscuity and for experimentation and deviancy and all that good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned degeneracy, and it's kind of a funny word, isn't it? Because I think it's been taken up by a few of us as a sort of humorous way, as a riposte to all of the ridiculous trad kind of bollocks that we see, particularly on Twitter the whole time. I mean, why do you think? Because I don't know what age you are, but I'm imagining, we're probably both of a somewhat more advanced years than some of these guys who are banging on about, buying a log cabin in Montana and stuff. And why did it become cool in these circles to sort of be a boring, kind of like plow horse? Really, I don't really get it.
I think I don't get it either. I think, and you're right. I have a birthday coming up soon. I'm heading into my mid 50s now. And,
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that kind of tradcon thinking that really appeals to, guys in their 20s and 30s who are kind of lost, and they want just solid, definitive something that they can hang their hat on and kind of spurg out on. And I get that, because I was that way too, in a sense, to a degree. And I think that men like we're analytical. We like codes. We like checklists. We like, hey, if I do A, B, and C, then I'm a good guy, because we're very idealistic in that sense. And I think the tradcon thing is it's a very simple checklist that, oh, hey, I can do those 10 things, those 5 things, whatever they are, and then I'm a good guy and I've got it made. And there is a little bit of truth to that, but to some degree, that whole tradcon thing is kind of the image, but there's more behind the scenes, and people who harken back to the good old days, forget. The thing that I always say on Twitter and everywhere else is, everybody's grandma undressed for sailors. And
yes.
It's like there's that hidden history of human nature that people don't want to talk about, and that very often that's on the other side of the tradcon image. And I think people like to focus on one side of the coin to the exclusion of the other.
Yeah. Well, there's this impression, isn't there, that, Western civilization is burning and it's all gone to pot, and it used to be better back in the old days, whenever those old days were. But it's, all you have to do is read some old books and you'll see that that's nonsense. Like I've been reading all of Shakespeare over this kind of pandemic period. Right. And I mean, Shakespeare is just filled with cuckoldry and women doing naughty things, and and so is all the old Greek and Roman classics as well, and the Victorian novels. There's people banging each other all over the place. So it's ridiculous to think that human nature was ever different to what it is now.
If you really take the time to learn something about history by going back and, like you said, reading the classics, reading what was, reading Chaucer and things from the Middle Ages, reading the Elizabethans, the Victorians, the early modernists, the postmodernists, every period, every decade in human history. The sky is falling, everything's on fire, people are barely holding it together. That's just the story that we've told ourselves from the very beginning. And it's usually either a cope, or it's a flex, or it's a way to try to get power over somebody else, and probably the worst, in the worst example. So I don't think we're burning any more than we ever have. I just think we're more aware of how many fires are out there, because we talk to people all over the world now on a daily basis. So there's just a little bit more awareness.
Yeah. Well, I guess the technology has sort of amplified things somewhat, because now I retweeted an article yesterday that somebody sent me about this OnlyFans woman getting her anus tattooed on and I mean, they didn't, I assume they mean actually right in the the cavity, because they showed a picture of her with a her head is facing the camera and the tattoo artist is at work in the back, and I assume so obviously that kind of thing it happens and can now be amplified via social media, and it become a news story and people pass it around and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that in Shakespeare's time, people, young maidens were doing that in the forest or anything. But I mean, like it's the tech has facilitated and somewhat amplified this stuff, hasn't it? But I think fundamentally, the fact that human nature, we're all kind of underneath this thin veneer of being, social animals, we're all sort of really quite bestial. I don't think that's changed, and I don't really think that ever will change.
No, that's human nature. That's how we evolved, and that, we can struggle with it. We can learn to adapt to it. We can do all kinds of things in response to it, but you can't get rid of it because that's how we got here. And it's how we are wired, and there's no real changing that, I don't think, unless evolutionary over the next 10,000 years something happens. But aside from that, we are who we are.
Or there's some sort of AI kind of, I don't know, add-ons or replacements, and then the AI robots are all kind of squeaky clean. But left to us,
if you think about all the, even all the novels that have been written over the years, like Brave New World, 1984. Anytime, the more a group of people or society tries to turn people into functional robots, the more we end up rebelling against that. And it's never, in all of that fiction. And there, look at all the dystopian fiction that's been written over the years. Humans always, give a finger to all that kind of stuff. It's just like the more tradcons try to insist on, A, B, and C as being how you become a true patriarch or whatever. The more I just, want to say, fuck that. And because it's not legitimate. It's fine if that's a choice that you want to pursue, but to say that the lack of that is why the West is falling, or that more of that is what will save the West, is not, to me, not even asking the right questions.
Exactly. And of course now we've got restrictions and lockdowns and things which are sort of, complicating the picture. Whereabouts are you based, by the way, if you can say?
I'm in the southern U.S. and we are not locked down.
You're not in Florida, are you?
No, I'm in Alabama. I'm in South Alabama, actually. So I'm close to Florida. I'm close to northwestern Florida.
Okay.
But I'm in South Alabama.
But you're not. There's no lockdown there.
No. Some people wear masks. Some people don't. I've known a lot of people that have gotten corona. I think I may have actually had it last January after I got back from Las Vegas.
Okay.
But nobody I know has died, and I've had some very elderly people get it. That had multiple health problems, and they still survived it. So there's less concern about that down here, right or wrong.
Was it ever locked down where you are in any big way? Was there ever a sort of big restrictions where you are, or has it always been fairly open?
It's been fairly open. They, for a while last year, they did shut down restaurants and bars for a while. So that was shut down. But for the most part, as far as you have to stay in your home, we'll arrest you if you're on the street, we haven't had any of that to that degree.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, because what we're seeing elsewhere is this very sort of, kind of authoritarian situation that's kind of popped up out of nowhere and taken everybody by surprise. And I mean, one of the things in the United Kingdom and also obviously in parts of America seems to be, but there's a surprise at how readily everybody's taken this on board and just been like, okay, you're going to shut down businesses for a year and, we're going to have to stay at home. Great. In fact, we want more of it and you should have done it earlier. And we want you to lock down even harder, and then you get ridiculous things. Like I saw, like they put in this sort of well, it's a strong suggestion at the moment that you can't leave the country. You can't leave the UK to go on holiday. Right. You can kind of leave for work purposes and stuff, but you're not supposed to go on holiday. And I saw some comment about people fiddling the system, and some guy in the comments underneath the article wrote, they should take a leaf out of the old, the people that used to guard the wall in Berlin back in the day, basically shoot them. And I said, like I reposted on Twitter, I'm like, so what? This guy's basically saying he thinks people trying to leave the UK to go on holiday should be shot. I mean, like, where has this mentality come from?
That's the thing that, I agree with you 100%. That's what I find the most disturbing, because I expect the government to want to put as many shackles on me as possible. Yeah. But the thing, and you see, and you read about this if you study history, but until you actually experience it for yourself, until you see your friends and neighbors just begging for more, a tighter, a wider boot on your neck, I think that always comes as a surprise to some degree, and I've been surprised by that as well. And that's the part that I find the most alarming is that there is no sense of, hey, wait a minute, let's think about what we're actually doing here. And in this past year, we've put people who've had family businesses for decades completely out of business. They'll never get that back again, all for something that is, that should be taken seriously to a degree. But the reaction by the government and by a lot of our fellow citizens has been to me a gross overreaction.
Yeah, I mean, that is my feeling on it. And, I don't like to go too far down rabbit holes about because on the other side of it, of course, you've got all of the kind of well, I suppose getting towards QAnon type people who the answer to everything is the Great Reset. It's just like, oh yeah, you see what's going on, Great Reset. It's Great Reset, innit? And then you say, okay, but how's this actually going to work? So what you're saying is this Great Reset is that they're going to close all the business, they're going to ruin all the businesses, everyone's going to be unemployed. Then the government's just going to give free money, forever? Well, that's all right. I'll just start smoking crack then. If that's going to be, that sort of doesn't sound too bad. But basically, the government's going to give everyone free money forever. And then the only jobs people are going to have for Amazon, or companies like Amazon, even though no one's got any money to spend because all the jobs have gone. And how's it actually going to work? And I've never had an adequate answer to that.
Yeah, because there is no answer to that. They don't exactly know how it's going to work. They're just, they'll make it happen and worry about whether it works later on. And they don't really, the people making these decisions, which we're allowing to make, they don't have, they don't really care. Their thing is power and preserving their own power and having the opportunity to exercise that power over other people, which is why most people get into political office anyway. And I think that if we are, the guy you mentioned who's talking about, lining up vacationers against the wall and shooting them, I think if we're shooting anybody, we're aiming at the wrong people.
yeah. But I mean, the whole sort of culture is very disappointing these days, because we're just turning away from the good old-fashioned filth, the good old-fashioned degeneracy. I'm in my 40s. Obviously, you're slightly older, and it. I don't know about you, but I mean, like for example, London, where I am currently, back in the 80s and even into the early 90s when I started, going out and stuff, it was quite scrappy. It was quite sort of like, and Soho, where Ernst Graf always writes about, it was full of like these strip clubs and, ladies of the night, and there were all these signs and things up these staircases and stuff. And I mean, that stuff's still there to a small extent, but everything's so sanitized now. Do you know what I mean? And like, it's, I don't know, it's, and what we've seen with Corona is everything's now, it's all sanitized, it's all health and safety, it's all, and the old bohemian sort of, frankly, degenerate filth seems to have been being sort of stripped away.
Yeah, and the thing you find out is, from my perspective, the old bohemian filth, it really wasn't as filthy as anybody thinks it was anyway. But for me, I was married for 20 years. So when I got divorced a few years ago, back in 2015, I said, all right, I've done the TradCon, play once. I'm not doing that twice. So I went full degenerate for a while after my divorce, because it was just fun. And that's what I wanted to do. And, we've just gotten to this point where there is, it's almost like a reinvigoration of the Victorian double standards of, the propriety in public, but then behind closed doors, anything goes. And people are, when I got divorced and I started, I dated multiple women at once, spinning plates. I dated women who were, 15, 20 years younger than me, sometimes. And, the reactions I got from even my friends were, my friends who had, they had daughters and stuff. So they're all, they're kind of on my case too. And it's like, the same people I partied with in my 20s were, we're singing a different tune now. And I get it to some degree, but it's like, I don't care. I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to do what I want because I can.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have kids, by the way? Can I ask?
I do. I have 2 sons.
Okay, cool. So you've ticked off that box in terms of the sort of the biological, legacy and all of that they talk about.
Yeah, except I don't consider my kids a legacy. I just consider them, these 2 humans I helped create, and that's about it. There's nothing, we've been making babies for, millennia. So there's really nothing special about having kids, and there's really nothing special about my kids except to me. And I think that's what people forget. If I have any kind of legacy, I want to, a legacy usually, historically, typically had to do with, what you've built, what you've left behind in terms of work, in terms of, possibly wealth and, an estate. But, people rarely use the word legacy to refer to their kids until recently. At least I've never heard that before. And it seems to me that's just, it's more, it's a cope or a flex or some kind of weird hybrid.
Yes. Well, this was something that came out with all these trad guys, and there was a time, it was about a year or so ago, probably a year and a half ago, I was really battling with the trad guys on Twitter the whole time, and it was a lot of fun. And actually, I was getting a whole load of more engagement from it as well. So I probably need to start doing it again. But then maybe the trad thing is less of maybe it has sort of quieted down a little bit. I don't know, but they were saying all of this stuff, and it all just seemed such bollocks to me, and it was all like to our family, it's about legacy and building a tribe and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, geez, come on, man. Do you really think that, in 2 generations' time, they're all going to be saying, oh, do you remember our granddad? He used to have a beard and make YouTube videos. He was like they're just going to go and do their own bloody thing anyway,
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I respect if you're going to have kids, you need to be there to raise them. I respect that. And I respect prioritizing your family if that's the road you choose to go down. But then, but that's not enough for a lot of people and a lot of these guys. And they just have to inflate that to where they're almost putting themselves on a pedestal by saying, hey, look at this great thing that I've done that, pretty much every creature on Earth does anyway, because they have to in order to propagate the species. So, is it really that much of an accomplishment to, blow your wad inside of, some chick? I mean, no, it's not.
Well, indeed. So romantic. Yeah, I mean, guys were just, they were just coming out with all this stuff, and it was just, I mean, it always sort of infuriated me. And I wrote this little book called Cucked, which was more of a pamphlet, really, but it was just a little book which was sort of pushing back on all of this stuff. And maybe I'll sort of promote it a bit more for at some point. But it just, all of this stuff annoyed me. But fundamentally, what annoyed me about it was not so much that I am anti anybody having a family or even getting married or doing whatever the hell they want to do. I mean, I don't really care. I mean, do what you want to do, right? But it was the self-righteousness and everything that these people had, and this sort of smug certainty that this was the absolutely right thing. And the whole thing of like, going and living on a farm and wearing a lumberjack shirt is the new rock and roll. And
I stayed out of that fight until they started calling everybody who didn't go their way degenerates, and that's when that's what I thought. Okay, here's some fodder for amusement, and and I saw you doing it, a lot of other people doing it, and it was just like, okay, well, if you want to call me a degenerate, hell yeah, I'm a degenerate, and proud of it. And the thing is that the stuff that they're calling degeneracy really isn't degeneracy, and it's really not anything. All these guys who are married and who are now tradcon or whatever they are, chances are pretty good that most of them, their wives are not the only women they've ever slept with. They may not be spinning plates now, but they've probably slept with multiple people before they settled down. And it's what, so now it's supposed to be a matter of timing or something. And it's just kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. But I mean, like you say, I mean, what they're calling degeneracy is really, it's kind of like going out to a bar and meeting a girl and bringing her back. It's, oh my God, degeneracy. And then of course, you take it to that nth degree, and you end up if you're familiar with Roosh, you end up in that position where you've become you've grown a massive beard and you've become, an born again Orthodox Christian. And it's kind of it's a fascinating sort of scene, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's the kind of thing, something I've noticed over my, 5 or so decades on Earth now, is that anytime, and I've done this, I'm guilty of this as well. Anytime you go all in on something to some kind of an extreme, and you eat, live, and breathe it every day for years, you eventually get burned out on it, and you look for something else. And that can be true of a hobby. That can be true of an individual you're dating. That could be true of a job or a career, and that could be true of stuff like I've been so heavy into nothing but game and pickup for 10 years that I want a change now because that hasn't satisfied me. Well, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with pickup and game or spinning plates. It just means you burned yourself out on it, and now you're looking for something else. Why can't it just be, okay, hey, this isn't working for me anymore, so I'm going to go in this other route without having to get but what ends up happening is, guys like Roosh, they get up on their soapbox, and now all of a sudden, they're preaching against things. And anytime I see people, strongly preaching against things, I'm very suspicious of that, because why are you so invested in having to tear something else down if what you're doing is so great? Shouldn't that just speak for itself? Yeah.
And I felt that there were a sort of a small group of people in the middle who were perhaps I suppose actually all of the Rule Zero guys more or less fall into this category. These guys in the middle who, it seems to me, are kind of, there's an individualist streak to all of us, isn't there? This group, whatever loose group of people, there's this sort of individualism. There's this sort of like, I want to do these things with my life. I want to have fun. I want to, have the kind of sex life I want to have, whatever. And then you've got people coming at you from both sides, because you've got the sort of right-wing tradcons on one side going, what about the West? And then you've got the far left on the other side who are saying, well, this is misogyny and this is, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, come on, guys, can't we just all have a good time and have sex with each other?
Right. Well, being kind of on the outside of that, one of the things that I see is that both those those left groups and those right groups, if you want to characterize them that way, they both have their own checklist of virtues that they think everybody needs to abide by. And that's what has made the West great. That's what will save the West from feminism or, whatever. Yeah. Meanwhile, all they're really doing is, yelling about that on the internet and in, Marriott conference rooms. Right.
Yeah.
And the thing I think that, recommends the Rule Zero crowd, because I've been watching all this going on for a while, is that, you guys tend to focus on, you don't really have this list of virtues people need to adopt. It's more like, we're here to equip you to get what you want. And if you do that in the context of some other kind of moral framework, that's really your business. We don't care. We're just trying to show you what works. And then you do with it what you will. And to me, that's what makes the most sense to me, because I don't really care about somebody else's values. I just care about, if I want a better love life, I want to get more chicks, whatever. I want to do what works, what I need to get that. If I want to make more money, it's the same thing. If I want somebody to give me a new religion, that's way outside of anything that seems reasonable to me. And there's plenty of religion out there already. So, what are you really doing?
Yeah. What is hip hop? Just corrected what I just said, because well, not with each other, but with girls. Yeah. Just to correct that in case there's any,
saying, right?
Yeah. In case there's any Black Pill haters watching. But I mean, but there's philosophically though, there's like, would you describe yourself as a libertarian? Would you?
Yeah, I mean, more or less. I mean, my politics and pretty much everything else is just, leave me alone. You know, don't bother me. I'm not going to bother you. As long as you're not doing something to victimize somebody else, truly victimize somebody else, physically, violently, whatever. As long as you're not stealing from somebody else, I could care less what anybody else does, and I don't want anybody nosing around in my business either. And that's to me, that's kind of the heart of libertarianism. It's like I heard a quote one time, and I don't remember who said it, but I think it was attributed to somebody British who said, I don't really care what anybody else does as long as they don't do it in the street and scare the horses. And that's kind of my way of looking at it. Just don't scare my horses, man. I don't care what you do.
Yeah. Which could lead us on to Ernst Graf, couldn't it? Because I suspect he scared a few horses in his time. You'd certainly be reticent about letting your horses get too near to him when he's in his pawn cabins and cinemas and things.
I'm sorry, the internet cut out on me for a second. I didn't hear that. Can you repeat it?
I was saying that this kind of leads us back to Ernst Graf, doesn't it? Because you probably have to be a little bit careful about the horses when he's around. I
tell you what, I mean, I don't think there's anybody more entertaining that I've ever read than Ernst Graf. He's like the Lawrence Stern of contemporary 21st century letters. I mean, I bought some of his books and I read a lot of his posts earlier, and I really enjoyed the way he wrote in a lot of his books when he's traveling to various places, and he's so good at evoking what it feels like to be in a particular bar in a particular town at a particular time, and just picks all the right details, and he writes about them with such power and elegance that in itself was very entertaining. And then when he started writing this series he's writing for PunchRiot, and he's been in every issue of PunchRiot since issue number 1, and it's kind of got there's this thing he's writing now, A Pilgrim's Tale, that's kind of a picaresque journey of this guy who's traveling in Europe, and he just has the worst, he has the best intentions, but the worst things keep happening to him in such a comedic way that he just cracks me up. I mean, I love reading that guy.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. For people that don't know, Ernst Graf is this guy. You can find him on Twitter. I think his name is Marquis de Shard, but he's called Ernst Graf anyway, so you'll find him if you. I mean, I follow him. Obviously, Nick does, and he's just a really great writer, and he writes a lot about sex and going and having sex in places.
Pretty much about. It's all really about sex. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all about sex, and a lot of it's about red light districts and hookers and things like this, and going to these dodgy places around Europe, a bit in London, in Soho, and Berlin, and where else, Vienna, places like this. And but yeah, I mean, I've known him actually for a few years, or just online, and I've always been a massive fan of his work, and I'm really glad actually that he is, he's writing. He's kind of got more recognition now, because I've always thought he was a genius. I always thought brilliant stuff.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's great.
I'm amazed that he's he's one of those guys. We publish a lot of different kinds of writers. I publish a lot of people who it's the first time they've written anything, and it's maybe a little bit rough around the edges, but it's still a really interesting, edgy, kind of savage story. So. Why the hell not throw it out there, because it's interesting. And then you got people like Ernst, who every time he sends me a piece, it's just ready to go out. There's no editing really that needs to happen there.
Yes.
And it's just a dream to just publish. And he's, I put him up there with some of the best people I've ever read, because he really is very skilled at what he does.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've always been fascinated with many of the same things that he writes about. And I've been to a lot of those places. And of course, it's always jokey on Twitter, because I probably passed him in the street before, and, I never actually met him in real life. And the worlds that he describes, I've always found really fascinating. And, and I was really glad when I first discovered his stuff that there was somebody out there who was writing about this stuff.
And it's not just that, but following him on Twitter, he has got such a, between the humorous posts and then the, just all of the, he's so well read, and so familiar with just some of the best literature out there from history, as well as music and art. And it's kind of like, I follow him, and he kind of keeps that part of, I don't really pay a lot of attention to art, and I don't pay as much attention to music as I used to in the classical sense, but he keeps all that stuff kind of alive for me, which is one of the reasons I enjoy following him. It's not just for the humor and, the silliness and stuff, but it's also, he takes all that stuff, I mean, extremely seriously. And, following him on Twitter is like, it's like, getting your college art appreciation and music appreciation courses kind of streamed to you on a daily basis. And he keeps me aware of so many interesting and beautiful things out there that I probably wouldn't pay attention to otherwise. So I think there's a lot of value in that.
Absolutely. Well, he's a very cultured man. Aside from being a pervert, he's and a degenerate. He's actually very cultured as well, which is a really nice combination, I think.
We all have to be something.
Exactly. But listen, we're coming up on the hour quite soon. If anyone's got any questions for Nick about the magazine, about writing, or just any questions in general about dating and game and all any of that stuff, then whack them in the chat and we'll get to them. But I did see somebody had written a little while back. I think we may have had a rogue TradCon viewer who looks Russian, because they put best time for one night stands, I guess like now in 2021. But where do you find a mother of your children? I don't know, really. Have you got any insights in that? Cancun pool party.
Mother for mine, but I don't have her anymore, and I'm not all that disappointed about it. So, excuse me. They're out there. I mean, there are. Excuse me. There are no guarantees, and there never were any guarantees. And if you look at history, like we were talking about, no matter who was married to whom in the old days, whether that's 10 years ago, 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, people have been fucking each other all over the place all the time. Nothing's really changed. And, there's no guarantee that, you know, you're going to find that high quality woman it's in a box all wrapped up with a bow and is going to be the perfect wife and everything else. And I think you can make that. I think some people do make that happen, but you know, you look at the divorce rates, you look at the infidelity rates. You know, we're not monogamous. You know, we're not really monogamous by nature. We didn't evolve to be monogamous by nature. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, one of the positive things I think about being alive in 2021 is that, you know, for a start, we've got all of this knowledge and we've been able to share all of this information and these notes and stuff. And so we've got perhaps a better idea of the reality of things on the ground than maybe we did before. Although as I say, like if you read old literature, you can, you know, I don't think any of the red pill stuff that we talk about is really new. You know, it's just that it's been presented and packaged in a new way. But nevertheless, you know, we've got this sort of network, we've got this information that's out there, and also we've got all these other great things like cheap travel, the ability to earn money online, cryptos, which we haven't even got around to yet. And all of this stuff. So, you know, you can say, well, listen, how do I want my life to look? Do I want to be a 1950s patriarch, or do I just want to let loose and go to Cancun and, you know, bang some strippers, you know? And if that's what you want to do, then that's absolutely something that you can engineer.
Well, yeah, and most of that, you know, Ryan Stone is really good about pointing out all of our hypocrisies, and you know the 1950s tradcon life really only existed in cigarette ads and ads for, you know, lawn care companies, and it was a way to sell a house. You know, it was just how they did it back then. But you know, when everybody moved to the suburbs and dad was commuting into town, you know, a lot of those moms were banging the milkman or the mailman or, you know, whomever. You know, there was a lot of that going on. The only difference is that people kept it on the down low better, and they didn't get divorced because of it as much. And now we've completely switched that around, but I don't think the actual human situation has changed. Just our response to it has.
Yeah. And Art says, what is both of your writing schedules like? I can't get into a rhythm. Then, do you have a sort of fixed writing schedule, or?
You know, not really. And my schedule is even worse now because I spend half of my time editing PunchRiot, or I also do freelance editing and ghostwriting and stuff like that. So I've got that going on, and I have to make, you know, for whatever writing I do, I have to kind of work it in between all of those paying gigs. And you know, if you can't get into a writing schedule, then don't get into a writing schedule. Just write. I think eventually, if you know, there are a lot of people who want to be writers, but they don't like writing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like you just have to, you know, you have to decide if it's important to you, you'll make time to do it. If not, then, you know, go play tennis or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for myself, what I've done is I've changed things up a little bit in recent months, and I'm now writing first thing in the morning. And I always find first thing in the morning I'm most fresh. So if pretty much roll out of bed, put the coffee on, sit down and do some writing. And I'm spending about 90 minutes. So I'm doing about 3 25-minute Pomodoro sessions, you know, working on whatever I'm working on. Yeah. And then
I did that too. There was a time, you know, years ago that I would get up at 3 or 4 in the morning. I would write for a couple hours before work. That just wore me out after a while. But I do think there's a lot of benefit to doing that, but you know, there's no secret to getting there. You just have to do it. It's kind of like, you know, you want to, how do you talk to women? You go talk to women. How do you make money? Figure out how to make money. I mean, it's, you know, I know that's an oversimplification, but you know, if it's important to you, you'll do it.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right in terms of, you know, build out time if you can, carve out your writing hours, but ultimately, you know, if you could only grab, I mean, there was a time actually I was really, really busy and I had this girl living with me, which is always a recipe for disaster. But it was only very brief, guys. Don't worry. I got rid of her. But I literally, I figured I really only had like 15 or 20 minutes a day that I could grab to do some writing. And so I sat down and I did 15 minutes every day and I wrote about 200 words. And I've got this whole little novel somewhere that I've written. I mean, it's probably completely incoherent, but nevertheless, you know, you could even a short. I remember a writing teacher actually once saying to me, he would get class to do an exercise and he'd say, write about this for 10 minutes. And people would sit there and write for 10 minutes. And he'd say, you know, you can get some pretty good stuff, actually.
Right. That's really good advice, actually, because I think people put such a burden on themselves to just be able to, you know, when it comes to writing, they want to just be able to sit down and it's like running a marathon. You just want to go out and be able to run that 26 miles or whatever it is, but you have to build up to it and you have to work at it. You know, like your buddy Rich Cooper says, do the work. So
yeah,
even just doing 5 or 10 minutes a day every day can be very fruitful. And when I've you know, I have coached some people before who wanted to get like past writer's block. So I would give them exercises like, all right, well, you know, write 200 words on going out to the mailbox and coming back, and something crazy happens to you on the way between your house and the mailbox and back. So just tell a story about that and let it be as crazy as you want it to be and not even make any sense. And then you get something down on paper and then you can read over it and then you can work at it. And the more you get down on paper, the more motivated you get to get into that habit or to sit down and write more, because now you've got something to work with and you're not just trying to spill it all out up from your head on paper and have it to be ready to go. And it teaches you how to, you know, revise and work through your ideas and think through a story and see where you can make it go, because you can make it go anywhere you want to. And so exercises like that are what I used to give writing students. And just anybody who asks me about, you know, writer's block and how do I get motivated, how do I get going?
Yeah, for sure. I'll tell you one little trick that I've often used, which is to use a random word prompt. So, and this actually works for writing articles and nonfiction as well. Like if your basic subject matter is dating and it's like, okay, so what do I write about? Go online, get a random word generator, ping up a random word and think, okay, so what does this suggest to me and how can I relate that back to my core subject? And I've got loads of ideas for articles and videos and stuff just through doing that. So, you know, there's those kind of creative prompts as well.
Yeah. And there's a, you know, one thing I started doing, which is how I actually started getting some followers on Twitter, although that wasn't really my goal, is that I was trying to work on things myself, and I was trying to, you know, say as much as I can in as little space as possible. And I was working on those kinds of exercises here at home by myself. And I said, you know, I'm going to start, you know, throwing these things up on Twitter and writing, you know, micro stories that, you know, they're no longer than the number of characters in a tweet. And that way I could both, you know, it would force me to try to make it the best I could be because I'm putting it out there in public. And, you know, it just kind of interested me. So that's what I started doing a year ago, like a year and a half ago. And I started posting these little micro stories, just tweet long stories in you know, these little scenes. And that actually helped me a lot, because when you're limited to a specific number of characters and, you know, people are going to be looking at it, it kind of, you know, helps put a little bit of pressure on you to, you know, make it the best you can possibly make it. And you have to like figure that out, because in such a short little clip, every single letter, every single word actually becomes very valuable because there's so little space there. So it forces you to focus on getting the most out of every word that you can. Yeah,
sure. I mean, sometimes having that discipline and having that limitation on what you can do is really spurs creativity, doesn't it? And that's why actually trying to write haiku or trying to write sonnets or something, you know, where you've got a very strict sort of set of rules, can be really, you know, can be a really cool exercise to try.
You know, I'm looking at the chat comments, and Roman Brodsky talks about monogamy being part or not of nature makes no difference. Killing is also part of nature, yet we do our best not to do it. Hey, I'm with you. I do my best not to be monogamous. So I'm right there with you, buddy.
It's a worthy cause. Well, listen, there was one other thing that I wanted to talk about. We'll go over too much over time, so we can't really get into it. But you're pretty into cryptos as well, aren't you? I've seen you with Charlie on your show and so on. I don't know what the question is really, but do you think that every young man should be investing in cryptos, and we need to learn about this space? And this could shore many of us up for the future if we do it right.
I think they definitely need to learn about it. Whether investing for them is the right thing to do or not is really up to the individual. But yeah. I do think it is a new dimension or facet to our global as well as our personal financial systems going forward. And it's always better to know as much as possible so that you can keep your options open and you can make the best decision for yourself that you can, as long as you do it, with some kind of with reasonable understanding. And so I kind of dabbled in it for a few years and got familiar with it. And then when I saw that we had such a good opportunity right now in this bull market to to make a little bit more gains than usual. I got some consulting from Charlie and got into it a lot heavier, and it's I'm not, there's no secret, there's nothing fancy there. It's just basic good strategy, but it's I've done well with that so far. I've been very happy with it.
Yeah, I saw John on his show earlier wearing a T-shirt that said "Crypto Degenerate" with Charlie, which I thought was quite good. I want to ask him where he got the shirt because I thought it was pretty cool.
I think they just had them made for themselves, I think.
Did they? I want to get one. They look awesome. Well, listen, anyway, thanks ever so much for coming on. It's been an amazing conversation. We covered quite a lot of ground today, and we probably could, carry on for a lot longer. But obviously, you're a busy man. So PunchRiot, there's a new issue coming out very soon, isn't there? And actually, I've got a story in it. So, guys, you do want to get on board. But do you want to tell the guys about that and where they can find you and everything else?
Yeah, sure. The new issue should be out Friday, maybe Saturday, sometime over the weekend at the latest. And Troy just wrote a new piece for that, and it's really good. Really excited to have you in the magazine, and hopefully many more to come. You can go to PunchRiot.com like it says down there.
Yeah, it's in the description.
That's right. You can get a sample issue of the magazine, which I'm actually going to be updating the sample soon as well. And then we've also got something new called PunchRiot Theater, where we're doing sort of these old school radio plays with original scripts. And we've got the episode 1 is already out. It's called The Case of the Missing Vaginas. And you can listen to that on the homepage as well. So.
Awesome stuff, man. Yeah, as I say, the links to Nick's Twitter and YouTube, and also to PunchRiot magazine itself, are in the description below. So do have a look at that, and do subscribe to PunchRiot, because as we said, I've got a story coming up in the new issue. So very excited about that. Well, Nick, anyway, thanks ever so much for joining me. I'm actually going to be on with you, aren't I, tomorrow, because you've got Let 'Em Burn running on your channel, right? And that's at 8 p.m. EST tomorrow.
8 p.m. Eastern, Let 'Em Burn, a show I've been doing with Rob Says. A lot of people may know him, and a crazy fella named Bull Rush. And we've been doing that show for about a year. And we're looking forward to having you on tomorrow night. Great
stuff. Looking forward to it. It's going to be in the wee hours of the morning over here in London, but I'm looking forward to it. A bit of late night degeneracy and decadence. So I'll be very excited to join you guys. Anyway, thanks everybody for tuning in. If you're watching this on the replay, many thanks as well. Subscribe to PunchRiot, subscribe to this channel, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.